Hello and welcome to 2024 Arizona Cardinals team preview. We got a healthy Kyler Murray, which should mean continued QB1 success in Fantasyland. Maserati Marv coming in as the new look wide receiver one, but can he truly dominate with the expected high ADP? James Conner, Trey McBride, and our one true short king, Greg Dortch. All that and so much more in the next 30 minutes. Get strapped in, guys. We're talking all things Arizona Cardinals. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. And joining me, as always, is Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain McFarland. And yeah, Dwain, Kyler's healthy. And what did he do last year when he was healthy? He did what he does every single year, put up QB1 fantasy numbers. That said, not quite as expensive as we've seen in the past. We do have more, pocket-oriented passers like Joe Burrow and CJ Stroud going ahead of Kyler. Not for me. I'm taking Kyler, 9 times out of 10. I do think he should be, the consensus QB6. But what do you make of Kyler at, an affordable for him QB8 ADP on more sites than not?
Yeah, I mean, Kyler gives us that dual threat, upside that we want. If you list the guys on, in the NFL that could throw for 4,500 yards and rush for 750, it's very short. And I believe that Kyler's still on it. I mean, if you look at him, you already mentioned it last year, once he came back from injury, Ian, 30.5 rushing yards per game. I mean, so that's the same as Josh Allen. 35 yards per game is where Jalen Hurts was at. Obviously, Lamar's in his own tier at 51 yards per game. But Kyler has a higher upside as a passer than Lamar. I think the big thing for Kyler Murray is we just need him to stay healthy. He is a guy that does seem to know how to avoid contact. He's taken, some hits over the years, but a lot of it, like the ACL, like that wasn't even somebody touching him. So we just need Kyler to stay upright when he's healthy and he's out there. And now you give him a new weapon in Marvin Harrison Jr. We've got an ascending tight end and Trey McBride. I think you can make an argument, to your point, that Kyler should be going, 6th, 7th in fantasy drafts. The beauty is you don't have to take him there. People are kind of tired of Kyler Murray. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's to do more with the injuries and things like that. But he's a guy that's going lower than what he should. Once Anthony Richardson is off the board and you're looking for, okay, who are my dual threats left? You got 2 more shots. You got Kyler Murray, and then you can go with Jaden Daniels. And Kyler is slightly more expensive than Jaden Daniels, but I think he should appropriately be because we've already seen that he can come out and perform at the NFL level. So yeah, I'm with you on Kyler Murray. Absolutely love him. One of my favorite targets right now at quarterback in drafts.
Round 8 in ESPN drafts goes at the end of round 5 on Yahoo and a lot more of these like best ball sites. So truly ESPN, love where we can get Kyler Murray just straight up going behind Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott and not even particularly close. So if you are in a 5-point, 6-point passing touchdown league, okay, I can get starting to bump guys like Burrow and Dak closer. But to your point, even about, Kyler versus Lamar, we do expect, Kyler to have a bit more upside from a passing perspective there. So he is one of only 4 quarterbacks in NFL history to average at least 20 fantasy points per game for their career. And when he came back last year, even without a true number 1 wide receiver, and I mean that with all due respect to Marquise Brown, but he missed the last 5 games. He was banged up for most of the other ones. This Cardinals offense, top 10 in EPA per play, yards per play, and touchdown drive percentage. So as Dwain said, we added Marvin Harrison Jr. And hell, we even got, the league's reigning 31st ranked scoring defense to help out and potentially lead to some more shootouts on a weekly basis. So we'll say that, Kyler, first game back last year, he hit 20.17 miles per hour on a scramble. That was his fastest speed since the end of 2021. So certainly did not look like he lost a step. We shall hopefully see Kyler again resume that 20-plus point fantasy upside, which will be good to have on that roster. Mention the new wide receiver one, Ohio State's finest, Maserati Marv. That said, Dwain, not exactly someone you can get for the cheap in Fantasyland. Regularly already going off the board as a legit wide receiver one inside the top 12, and for good reason. We have a really freaking good quarterback in Kyler Murray. We have not very much target competition, especially in the wide receiver room, and we have a certifiable baller in terms of the talent department. That said, ESPN, only CD, Tyreek, Jamar Chase, the Sun God, Justin Jefferson, AJB, Puka, Garrett Wilson, and Devontae Adams are going ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. Look, I don't doubt the talent at all, but I mean, for every Jamar Chase that we had finished as a wide receiver 5 as a rookie, we had Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, AJ Green, Mike Evans, all finished wide receiver 13th or worse. So how confident are you in Marv joining, again, the most productive rookie wide receivers we've ever seen? Or do you think maybe, at least for 2024, the cost is a bit too high?
I mean, The cost is a tad high. I mean, I don't want to. You hate starting with that because we love Marv. Like Marv is a really great player, but I still think the price it doesn't scare me away. I'm still very willing to take him in fantasy drafts, Ian. So if you look at the wide receiver supermodel over at FantasyLife.com, where we look at all the things that have mattered for a college player and then what that means to future production in the NFL, obviously draft capital is one of those things. You guys go check that out. You can see what all those factors are. But going back to 2018. 5 prospects have reached the 85th percentile, and their year one results were really good. Jamar Chase was the wide receiver 5 with 18 fantasy points per game. Jalen Waddle was the wide receiver 13 at 15.5 points per game. And then Devonta Smith at wide receiver 38. And I think that is a fair representation of the range of outcomes, which is kind of where you were pointing as well for Marvin Harrison Jr. I think the upside is he could be a top 5 or 6 wide receiver, but you're already taking him right now as a top 12 guy. I think there's also, the median outcome, which was Jalen Waddle in his rookie year, and this is points per game, wide receiver 13. So he'd be right around where you're taking him in fantasy drafts, but there is a floor here. There is a scenario where he is more of a wide receiver 3 and that he doesn't pay off where you're having to take him in drafts. So I think it just comes down to like how much risk you want to take as a drafter. But when I start to stack him up against all the other names that go around him, Ian, I can see why Marvin Harrison goes where he does, okay? Because you're looking at Brandon Ayuk. We love Brandon Ayuk, but man, that's a loaded offense. Marv has a much more clear path if he is good to getting a 26, 27% target share even as a rookie, right? You start to look at him compared to other names that go down a little bit more down the list. Jalen Waddle's got to deal with Tyreek Hill, who's an absolute monster target earner. We've got Deebo Samuel. We already talked about Brandon Ayuk. There's a lot of other names where when you start to stack Marvin, I think he is going about where he should, but I will acknowledge that there is some downside here, and the upside is not quite as much because we've already priced him up so high. So I think that that's the thing that as a drafter, you've got to consider whenever you're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. For me, I've been willing. I maybe part of it is just because, I spend so much time studying the rookies and I've watched him so much, and then I've studied all the data around, and I'm like, I just have to take him because I love the player. But I get it if there's someone that's thinking really the better move in year one is to fade Marvin Harrison Jr.
Home league, you're in the early part of round 2. The top 10 wide receivers we feel just a bit more sure about are already off the board. Marvin Harrison or Jonathan Taylor, you have 2 wide receiver starting spots.
2 wide receiver spots, half PPR, I'll go JT. Give me full PPR so I can just have one of them where I'll say that I'll still go Marv. But yeah, I think that's an important distinction you make though, Ian. Like if it's 3 wide receiver PPR, I think you still can easily go Marv there. Yep. But if you're in a league where you only get to start 2 wide receivers, then I do think that's where you can start to swing to some of the running backs going in that range. So, and it's cool. Like we've got a tool that actually does all that for you guys. We put in the ranks, but we've got a rankings hub that allows you to come in, put all your scoring roles into it, how many starters you have at each position, and it actually adjusts all those things for you. We also take ADP into account. There's a lot of factors that are in play. So you guys make sure that you check that out over at FantasyLife.com.
And again, I don't think it's anything to do with where Marv stacks up with the wide receivers, but I do think it's a bit of a tier break. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, do I want Jonathan Taylor right now or Marvin Harrison Jr.? Because if you don't take Marv, well, 12 picks later on ESPN and Yahoo, you can still look at guys like Nico Collins, like DK Metcalf, and even like Drake London, who again, going quite a bit later. And I think we'd all agree, certainly, have within their realm of possibilities this year, the opportunity to outperform one Marvin Harrison Jr. So of course, this isn't a passing game completely devoid of target competition due to rising third-year tight end Trey McBride. Like Marv, though, he costs a pretty penny in fantasy land. Goes from anywhere as like the tight end 3 to tight end 5, depending on the site you're looking at. So on the one hand, Dwain, only Dave Njoku and Evan Ingram managed to outscore McBride during weeks 8 through 18 last season after he was elevated to starting job. On the other hand, that did come really without a number 1 wide receiver in the offense, again, with Hollywood Brown being sidelined or injured for the vast majority of last year. And I do just wonder if McBride deserves that early round treatment in the same manner as guys like Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, and Mark Andrews. So thoughts on McBride and just how impressive his year 2 season was?
Yeah, I think he is deserving. And I think you said the right things, though. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be more target competition than anything he saw on the field last year. Now, Hollywood Brown can earn targets, but he was never really healthy. So even whenever they were on the field together, it was just really the Trey McBride show. So that means little additional things that you get schemed up around the line of scrimmage where you don't even necessarily have to earn the target. Those probably won't all go to him because they're going to give some of those to Marvin Harrison Jr. So I did bring him down. Last year, he had a 29% target share after he took over the lead role. So that's really all you need to know. The dude's a beast. You can't get a 29% target share just because there's no one else on the field. Like the opposing defense is actually trying to stop this at some point, and you have to be good enough to keep on keeping on. He had a 26% air yard share, which is elite for a tight end, and then 2.09 yards per route run. So the talent profile, I feel really good about McBride. The starting quarterback situation with Kyler Murray, I feel really good about. But I did bring him down some in my projections because Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be on the scene. Having said all that, I have him as my tight end 3. Tight end 3 overall, 1 spot ahead of Mark Andrews. I do have them in the same tier. So if you guys would rather lean into Mark Andrews, knowing that this is a guy that's really giving you, basically 3 years in a row of top 3 fantasy production, if we're just using a cutoff of points per game and what the average top 3 tight end has done since 2011. But McBride, I do feel like Ian has that potential upside to be the kind of guy that's really rare for us in fantasy. And I think Andrews has shown us he's probably somewhat like he's really good, but not going to be the next Travis Kelce. There's a chance that maybe McBride is a Kelce. Maybe McBride is more like a Gronk, even though stylistically, like he's a different player than that. So I do want to be in on McBride. I think that the price is okay on a lot of these sites. And especially when I start comparing him to other things that go in that range, he's the tight end that once, I get into that, once I've passed Kelce and Laporta, that's the most likely to click on for me. I do like him a little over Andrews. I do like him a little bit over Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts and George Kittle as well.
ESPN, Trey McBride goes pick 54. Some guys going just ahead of him: Devonta Smith, Anthony Richardson, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, and Jalen Waddle. Going just behind him, we have guys like Aaron Jones, George Kittle, Zay Flowers, Ramondre Stevenson.
That's tougher, man, on ESPN.
Yeah.
Where, I will say sometimes, we get underdog draft brain.
Malik Neighbors goes like 10 picks after, man. That is
yeah. So it does get a little tougher on those sites because like when you get a name like Jalen Waddle going right next to Trey McBride, now the thing is you already got 2 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers and you get to that pick. Well, then I'm probably leaning to like the thing I need because I think they're both very good, young, talented players. But I will say when you name those names off, that is a tougher decision.
Look, McBride is someone I'm not overly high on this year, but I have a hard time. I can't get him out of the top 7. He's certainly in that tier with Kittle, with, Kincaid, and with Kyle Pitts for me. So honestly, because McBride's usually being priced up ahead of those guys, I haven't been getting him a ton of drafts, but certainly, hard to look at what he did last year and not think that there could be an even higher ceiling. Only George Kittle averaged more yards per route run than McBride on the season. Over 2 for a tight end is absolutely ridiculous. Final point here, Dwain, I seem to be the only fantasy analyst in the industry that cares a little bit about this, but the Cardinals used the 82nd overall pick on Illinois tight end Tip Raymond. And I know doesn't have the biggest track record as a receiver, but the relative athletic score, 11th best at the position ever. That seems pretty good. And like we've seen Dawson Knox regularly really make life hard on Dalton Kincaid. I don't think it's preposterous to think a day 2 tight end could complicate things a little bit for McBride, especially when we just looked at it and we saw over the first season and a half of his career, it wasn't like the Cardinals just told Zach Ertz to beat it and get McBride out there. So again, I don't think Tip Raymond is going to take McBride off the field and turn him into this 60% route rate tight end. But man, if we see McBride going from 85% to 70%, like that matters.
Yeah, I'm count me as one of the analysts that's not worried about it, just because like when I look at Tip Raymond, like what is his path to getting on the field? Could he still some blocking snaps? Yeah, I think so. But I don't see a scenario where suddenly we look up and Trey McBride's at 70% route participation. Like I feel pretty good. Like he's still going to be close to 80%. They're going to run 12 personnel. So that's going to be a chance for Ryman to get on the field as well. Had Ryman been like any stronger, like in his, collegiate profile and the rookie supermodel, like I would have more concerns. But it's just the draft capital. And we've seen this time and time again. These teams, man, spend these day 2 picks on rookie tight ends that like don't have a great, profile as far as receivers. And they say they're going to help them block. And then we never even see them. Like every year we get this profile of player get taken. So I get you on the athletic score. Overall, it matters more for tight ends than it does for other positions. So, I mean, you may have something on that.
Peter Schrager's favorite player in the NFL draft, which again doesn't necessarily mean he's going to do anything with McBride. But again, Tip Raymond, I'm going to, use this lukewarm possibility take as just 100% certifiable evidence that I was right if McBride is anything less than a top 3 fantasy tight end this year. Gotta love that. But again, guys, we have tons of tools to help you try to figure this out for yourself if you so desire. Our rankings, our ADP, even Dwain's utilization report hub, all that and so much more is a part of our new premium package, Fantasy Life Plus. Here for more on that is the one, the only Matthew Berry. We'll be right back after this quick word on Fantasy Life Plus.
When I started Fantasy Life, I had one mission in mind, really just one: fantasy football and sports betting for all. And what started out as just a newsletter has now grown into a full-fledged media company. And here I am to tell you we're ready to evolve yet again. I'm introducing Fantasy Life Plus. It's a premium product built upon a suite of fantasy and sports betting tools to take your game to the next level. I know, I hear you, really, Barry, a premium product? Okay, I understand, but get this. Our mission has not changed, right? Our newsletter will forever remain free. All of our expert analysis, free. And we will still provide sets of fantasy football rankings for free. Everything you need to be a great fantasy football manager, you will still be able to do for free at FantasyLife.com. But hey, if you really want to level up, then Fantasy Life Plus is for you. Fantasy Life Plus will introduce new tools like our Draft Champion, customizable rankings, site-wide league sync integration, player prop models, game models, DFS pick'em builders, and so much more. Seriously, just check it out. Go to FantasyLife.com to learn more. And as always, may your trades never be vetoed, may your flex plays always work out, and may your Monday Night Miracles always come through.
Thank you, Matthew and Dwain. Like most teams other than the Seahawks and the NFC West, we do have a good amount of continuity in the coaching staff. Jonathan Gannon and his offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, are back for their second year leading the Cardinals. So last year, again, kind of just a very tough situation for everyone involved with Kyler Murray missing the first half of the season. They did better down the stretch, but still, man, 3-5 with Kyler under center. We did have the nice December road wins in Pittsburgh and in Philly, which was cool. But, at the end of the day, similar to Seattle, actually, there are still pretty massive problems at the line of scrimmage. PFF's ranked 25th ranked offensive line only returns 3 of 5 starters. Did add ex-Bengals offensive tackle Jonah Williams, ex-Seahawks center Evan Brown, and took another Illinois player, offensive lineman Isaiah Adams in round 3. But yeah, Dwain, again, just overall thoughts on the Petzing experience last year, and if you're expecting, this offense to look all that much different in 2024.
Yeah, I don't think it'll look incredibly different. Like he's not a guy that like overly leaned into a lot of the scheme cheat codes, but he was around the league average or above, like in most of them. Like whether it was play action or motion, you're going to get a lot of 2 wide receiver sets. They like to run a lot of different multiple personnel things, mix it up, give you some heavy looks, then try to spread things out a little bit more with a guy like Greg Dortch, one of your favorites, Ian, get him into the slot. Yeah. So I think you're going to see a lot of multiple personnel stuff. I think you're going to see Trey McBride as well as Marvin Harrison Jr. on the field most plays. I think Michael Wilson will also be out there plenty. So I think it's fine. It's not one of these offenses that I look at and get super excited about. But I will acknowledge that, Drew Petzing comes from that Kevin Stefanski tree, which runs more of that offense like we just talked about. And he's had some really hyper efficient years. So I think getting a full year with Kyler Murray and fully figuring out exactly how they want to run the offense with Kyler under center all the time. I think we could see a little bit more innovation and defenses just having to be more concerned about Kyler's legs than maybe what they were at the end of last year. Because even though Kyler came through in the rushing department, like his scramble rate was down, only 5% of his dropbacks were turning into scrambles. So he was clearly not trying to go 100%, probably protecting his knee a little bit, in that first year back. So I think now, being another year removed from that injury, I think there is some potential here for some different wrinkles. I will say it is a team that even once Kyler was back, the drop back rate over expectation, -8%. So they were more of a run heavy team. So I think that'll be the interesting dynamic to really watch here. Some of this obviously comes down to the way the defense plays and what they expect to get out of their defense. But remember, drop back rate over expectation takes into account the game script. Like it doesn't care if you were losing, if you were in a close game or leading game. It's adjusting for what the difference in the score margin was, depending on what time that was occurring during the game. And the Cardinals were one of the more run heavy teams we saw in the league.
very good at running. I mean, second in EPA per rush in weeks 10 through 18 once Kyler and even James Conner got back from injury. But yeah, man, didn't exactly see fireworks through the air. In fact, I believe, Kyler Murray never eclipsed even 265 passing yards, was under 250 in all but one of those final starts. So already mentioned, wasn't exactly working with, the world's greatest wide receiver room. Marvin Harrison Jr. will help, but just how much? Takes us to the win total, which is set at 7.5 with a plus 125 on the over. So I'm taking the under here, Dwayne. I know that's where the market is telling us to go, but I mean, just look at this franchise. Starting in 2018, they have won 3, 5, 8, 11, and then back-to-back seasons with just 4 wins. So I still have massive questions about the offensive line and the defense. And as much as I do believe in Kyler, the fantasy quarterback, I mean, let's face it, I don't think he's, exactly barging his way into too many top 5 NFL real-life signal caller conversations. And just honestly, again, haven't seen him consistently pass this total in any of his previous years. So give me the under. Again, this is a team that went 3-5 down the stretch with Kyler back and healthy last season.
Yeah, this line opened at 6.5. So I would have been taking the over, in that situation. Gets a little bit tougher at 7.5. I will say, like, adding Marv, another year with McBride, Kyler Murray fully healthy. And if you can fully harness Kyler Murray's, dual threat nature, that is something defenses have to sweat about. So I do think there's a chance like they beat this, but I am with you. I'm going to go with the under. It was a little bit low when it started off at 6.5, but now that it's at 7.5 in a really tough division and some of the other questions that you talked about, I do think it gets pretty tough. And let's be honest, as much as we've liked Kyler in fantasy land, he hasn't necessarily been the best quarterback NFL wise and really pulling things out and leading his team to these big victories. So with Kyler back, I think there's some optimism here, but I'm with you. I'm going to go with the under.
And that was one of the things, man, because I went back to Kyler's numbers in 2020 and 2022 when he had DeAndre Hopkins, and I honestly kind of expected him to have these top 10 numbers as a quarterback. But nah, man, among 53, 29th in yards per attempt, 23rd in EPA per dropback, 12th in completion percentage over expected, 11th in PFF passing grade. But, good. That's really good. And you add in the rushing, Kyler's a really good quarterback. But when everyone else around him, other than, Marvin McBride, isn't maybe all that great, give me the under there. But hey, if you guys disagree, I invite you to take your action over to DraftKings Sportsbook. Excuse me, everyone. I get excited sometimes. All new customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly over at DraftKings Sportsbook. All you got to do is download the app now and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. That's right. New customers who bet just $5 on anything will get $150 back in bonus bets instantly. And sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, DraftKings is the one-stop shop for all things daily fantasy, where you can join in on all the fun and have a shot to win cash prizes. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Again, new customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 back in bonus bets instantly. The crown is yours. All right, Dwayne, I don't think we have a huge position battle going on here. It's more so to figure out who is actually going to be the number 2 target in the wide receiver room. I suspect wide receiver, 3 wide receiver sets are going to be filled out by Michael Wilson on the outside and Greg Dortch in the slot, but they also did sign Zay Jones. I will say the Zay Jones deal itself was nothing to write home around. Just a 1-year, I believe, $2.2 million deal. Not all that different from what a fellow backup wide receiver, Chris Moore, got from this very same organization. So Greg Dortch, our one true short king. Kyler Murray said that if he was 6'3", he would be a top 5 option at the position. Gotta love that. Obviously, Rondale Moore got traded to the Falcons in return for Desmond Ridder. So Michael Wilson, we're getting a little bit of hype. Coaches, I don't think are going to be throwing their players underneath the bus. So when I hear some of these clips from the press conferences, it's nice to hear nice things about them, but not necessarily, taking one clip of Jonathan Gannon hyping up Michael Wilson as a sign that we need to draft him in fantasy land. But out of these guys, because we regularly see both Wilson and Dortch and obviously even Zay Jones available in the final rounds of fantasy drafts, any of them that you've been, especially willing to put a chip down on?
I'm with you. I do think that Michael Wilson's the guy that they want to be on the field. He's a guy that they do have a little bit of draft capital in from the year before. I know they like him as a blocker. They're going to run a lot of 2 wide receiver personnel stuff. So I think he's the favorite there. He wasn't great, though. Last year And he wasn't great in college either, as far as like his target earning profile, all those different things that we look at. And it was a bit subpar last season, even though there were large stretches where, man, they really needed someone, Ian, to step up with Hollywood Brown hurt. And it ended up being all Trey McBride. What makes Trey McBride even more impressive is if you go start looking at all of the yards per route run and all the different things for these other guys, and then compare it to what Trey McBride did, like it makes him look like an absolute king because no one else could get anything going. Having said all that, he'll be going into his second year. So I think that he's the favorite early on. I'm fine mixing these guys up, but there isn't one for me, especially if you're going to be in like a 14, 15 round draft over on ESPN or a Yahoo platform. I'm not touching any of these guys. It's got to be a deeper league, and then I would be willing to mix some of them. And I will say the guy that's been the most impressive when given his opportunities on the field is the guy you named. It's Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch is the guy that I think has flashed the most with his opportunities. I think he's shown that he can really be a mismatch from the slot. Can he be more than that? I don't know, but that's what they ask him to do, is play in the slot. And he is a guy that's just really tough to cover from based on his short area quickness and things like that. And if you look at the roster and some of the different things they're asking these players to do, could I see a world where there are games where Greg Dortch gives you like a spike week? I think certainly, but really hard to put any of them, I think, in your starting lineup to start the season in really any shape or form of a format. We would basically be waiting, hoping that one of them break out.
Dortch did return punts and kicks. So if you're in a wonky league like the Scott Fish Bowl, make sure you check that out. And yeah, man, just a true yak beast. So I've taken Dortch, more times than I care to admit in round 18, literally the last round of best ball drafts. But again, specifically for redraft, it pains me to say, I do think it's going to be tough to confidently put this dude in our starting lineups more weeks than not. We couldn't do it last year. And I just, it's not going to get really any better than the lack of competition he had down the stretch, because in addition to Marquise Brown being banged up, Michael Wilson missed 3 games later in the season with shoulder and neck injuries. But yeah, and honestly, that's kind of why I'm lower on, I'm just not really going on my way for Michael Wilson either. I mean, to see him come back in week 15, playing almost every single snap out there and just 2 consecutive goose eggs, before he got a little bit going down the stretch, it was probably his best opportunity of his career to really beat a number 1 in Arizona. We just didn't see a ton of it. So he flashed a little bit. I do think a guy his size and kind of some of the route running nuance, you see the double move highlights and stuff, is impressive. He did have ESPN's 6th best catch rating, but yeah, just think that again, we're looking at the number 3 at best pass game option here. And I think it's going to be a pretty wide gap between Marvin McBride and everyone else. We have not talked about another star in this team, though, Dwain. James Conner, the RB1. Y'all, right? Trey Benson did get day 2 draft capital. Certainly seems like Conner is still going to be the guy. I mean, the numbers he put up last year were absolutely ridiculous. 2nd in yards after contact per carry, 2nd in missed tackles forced per carry, 4th in explosive run play rate. I mean, if anything, man, like the problem with James Conner last year was that he was one of the worst running backs in stuff rate. He's almost more of a boomer bust rusher. And I think people just don't watch Cardinals games, or they see his low speed on Madden and they kind of equate him as this boring football player. He's got some Kenneth Walker to him, man, the way he cuts back across the field a lot of times. So also certainly adept at catching the football. And I mean, just where's the respect, man? 2021, RB 35 ADP, finishes RB 8. 2022, RB 15 ADP, finishes RB 9. Last year, RB 25 ADP, finishes RB 13. So yes, he's missed 2, 4, and 4 games over the last 3 seasons, but it seems like he's the only guy, among the Kyron Williams, the CMCs, the Jonathan Taylors of the world, who is actively having the injury proneness held against him. So do you see enough from Trey Benson, Dwain, your 2nd ranked running back in the rookie RB supermodel, to think that Conner is going to be anything other than a top 15 running back as long as the injury gods stay out of the way?
Yeah, I think there is what happens to start the season, and then what happens at the end of the season. And so if the Cardinals are playing well and James Conner's not injured, James Conner's probably like the unquestioned lead back, like for the entire season. But if James Conner gets hurt and opens the door for Trey Benson to get on the field, I think it could be problematic when he comes back to really to regain like all of that work that he once had, which was truly, as close to an every down bell cow back as we've seen, honestly, in his games that he's been on the field over the last few years. You did a good job of outlining that. And then whenever you look at James Conner, the other thing is, what if the Cardinals, you already took the under on 7.5, so did I. What if this still is a rebuild year? And we're talking about a team that heading into December, they've got 3 wins. Are they going to be willing to go ahead and start to look more towards the younger players, see what they have in Trey Benson? Because they know what they have in James Conner, but they also know that he's probably at that point not going to be in their future, and what they're going to need to do to really revamp the team and take a step forward in the 2025 season. So to start the year, I feel great about James Conner. I think the question is, how does the season overall unfold? And Trey Benson being there really complicates things for him, because I think there are paths that you potentially go down here that Trey Benson becomes a real problem for James Conner. I will say the coaches have been completely in James Conner's corner. Sometimes it's tough to decipher, coach speak and things like that, but they seem to be very much in the camp of, no, James Conner is our guy. But at the same time, like, you did spend decent draft capital on a running back. So you were at least thinking about it. And there is some, I don't, whether that's concern about James Conner breaking down or whatever, or wanting to have more of a 1-2 punch, we don't know. So that's something we'll have to keep an eye on in training camp. So beginning of the year, love James Conner. I have a feeling when you're trying to win all the money in your fantasy league at the end of the year, like it could be a little bit of a different story because Trey Benson being there.
It is one of those things. I know you're not saying this, but I've seen others imply that Connor's going to get hurt down the stretch. I mean, he's been hurt the last 2 years, but he got hurt midseason, and guess what? Came back down the stretch and was putting up RB1 numbers in the fantasy playoffs. So again, just don't go overboard with, what we can really be predicting from injuries, going on. Guess what? Trey Benson had a multi-ligament knee surgery, as a freshman at Oregon back in 2020. That's a more serious injury than anything Connor's had during the same exact timeline. So I'm in on Trey Benson at his price. Guess what? I think he's one injury away from an RB1 role, a la Blake Corum. A little bit more priced up than Corum, but moral of the story, James Conner going behind guys like Zamir White, like Jonathan Brooks. Yeah, miss me with that. Even DeAndre Swift as well. Jonathan Brooks, I guess I can see, the path to upside there. But again, I don't even think it doesn't have to be James Conner or Jonathan Brooks. I like both guys at that price. And Dwain, accordingly, that takes us to the end of our team preview, where we get to go ahead and compare this organization to a TV, movie character, or whatever you want at this point in the podcast, because I'm going to go with a video game for this one. I'm saying this is like Pablo Sanchez getting back from summer camp, and now they actually also introduce actual superstar players into the backyard sports games. Pablo, like Kyler, best athlete on the team, best player on the field more times than not. But guess what? Like in 1998 or wherever, they started bringing Jerry Rice and company into the games. And no, I'm not saying Marv is Jerry Rice, but we have a legit baller on the outside, laughable group of characters before, but now we have our one true short king and some legit high-end talent on hand. We'll see if that is enough to, again, get some fireworks going. I'm at least confident enough in the top offensive stars doing their thing in Fantasyland. But yeah, that was a rough one for me there, Dwayne. You got anything better?
No, dude, I don't. I was going video game too. I was going with Ready Player One. Obviously, we're going with the Kyler plays video games theme here. In that game, like if you really kick ass at video games, you also are kick ass, in real life, because the whole point is you've got to win, at the video game. So like we find a world where we do that for Kyler Murray, and really not trying to take shots at Kyler. I think it's a bit unfair, some of the, criticism that he obviously took in the media around playing some, Call of Duty. How many of you guys, if we had to put out there how many hours of Call of Duty you've played, and you have really serious jobs also in the day, what would that look like? Yeah, you probably have some skeletons in your closet, if you want to even call them that. My thought is, you're doing your job, you're doing it well, go do your thing. The big thing with Kyler is he hasn't necessarily won yet. So I think that's why people jump on it. So no, nothing better. I'll just piggyback off of what you had, and we'll go the cheap route, just trying to get a funny laugh out of going with a video game movie.
Honestly, I didn't even put the video game part of it together. I was just kind of calling out.
Oh, man, that's actually more hilarious. That makes yours better.
So there you go. But I agree, the pushback on Kyler for that is quite ridiculous. If we're just trying to criticize quarterbacks for like the amount of time they're not spending on football, like where's the discourse on CJ Stroud, his never-ending offseason media tour? I don't care about that, but I also don't care about Kyler's video game. So maybe you're different, but either way, thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Life Show. We have all team previews ready for you at your disposal directly where you listen to this one. And yeah, have a great day listening to those and doing whatever else you want to do in your life. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in to the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.